It was another busy evening at the upscale restaurant. The smell of freshly baked bread mixed with the scent of roasted meats and herbs. The lights were soft but bright enough to make the polished tables gleam, and the gentle hum of conversation filled the air. For the young waitress, this was just another shift, long and tiring. But she had learned early on that patience and a calm smile could carry her through anything. She moved gracefully between tables, carrying trays carefully, taking orders, pouring water, and refilling wine glasses with practiced ease. Every movement was measured, efficient, and almost automatic after years of experience. Her day had started early, waking up before sunrise to make breakfast for herself and her younger sibling, who was still asleep upstairs. Money had always been tight, and she had learned to stretch every dollar, to save wherever possible, and to work hard without complaint. She liked her job in the restaurant, not because it was glamorous, but because it gave her independence and the ability to support her family. She enjoyed small victories. When a customer smiled at her service, when a tip was left unexpectedly, or when a regular said hello and remembered her name. These moments made the long hours worth it. As the evening progressed, the restaurant began to fill. Families celebrated birthdays, couples enjoyed quiet dinners, and groups of friends laughed together over shared plates. She moved quickly from table to table, ensuring everyone had what they needed. Her focus was always on the customers, but she also kept an eye on the kitchen staff, the other waiters, and the subtle rhythm of the restaurant. She had learned that keeping everything in balance was the key to a smooth night. The doors opened, and a small group entered, drawing immediate attention. One of them was a man whose presence seemed to fill the room. He was tall, dressed in a tailored suit, with an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. His companions followed closely, equally well-dressed, talking quietly among themselves. The waitress noticed them instantly because the staff had been warned that this table required extra attention. The billionaire, as he was commonly known in local circles, rarely dined in public, and when he did, everyone watched closely. The young waitress took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and approached the table with her usual smile. "Good evening," she said politely. "Welcome. May I show you to your table?" The billionaire looked up, eyes scanning her quickly, almost as if evaluating her worth in a single glance. He nodded, not unkindly, but there was a subtle smirk, a quiet confidence that he expected to be admired and obeyed. She led them to a corner table with a clear view of the restaurant, a spot that offered privacy but also allowed the group to observe the room. She pulled out chairs, helped them settle, and handed out menus. Her hands were steady, her voice calm, but inside, a small knot of anxiety formed. She had served wealthy and influential people before, but this was different. Something about the way he carried himself made the atmosphere heavier, charged, almost intimidating. The billionaire's companions began speaking among themselves in Arabic, a language the waitress understood, but rarely heard in the restaurant. At first, it seemed normal, just a conversation in another language. But soon, the tone shifted. There was laughter, soft but sharp, and she caught fragments that were clearly directed at her. They were mocking, their words pointed, questioning her intelligence, her appearance, even her background. The waitress's heart sank for a moment, but she forced herself to remain composed. She had faced judgment before, but this felt different because of who they were. Their wealth and status gave them a sense of untouchable power, and she knew that a misstep could make the evening even harder. She told herself to focus on her role. She poured water into glasses, refilled bread baskets, and nodded when they asked questions about the menu. Every time she moved around the table, she caught bits of the conversation. Each mocking phrase was like a small dagger, but she did not let it show. She had learned the art of silent strength, the ability to endure insults without reacting. It was not weakness, it was control. She knew that any reaction could feed their amusement, and she refused to give them that satisfaction. As she took their order, she noticed the billionaire's gaze lingering on her. It was sharp, assessing, almost predatory. She felt the weight of his stare but kept her voice steady. "Would you like any appetizers while you decide on your main course?" she asked politely. He nodded dismissively and replied in Arabic, assuming she would not understand. His companions laughed quietly. She felt a flash of anger but did not respond. Instead, she smiled politely and nodded, writing down their requests with a calm hand. The kitchen was busy, and she carried the trays carefully, balancing plates of steaming food. She noticed the other diners glancing occasionally at the billionaire's table, curious about the group of important people in their midst. She moved with efficiency, keeping her focus on the task, but inside, she reminded herself to breathe. It was easy to let fear or frustration take over, but she had worked too hard and come too far to let anyone shake her confidence. She had her own worth, and she refused to let anyone diminish it, not even a man with immense wealth and influence. As the evening went on, the laughter from the billionaire's table grew louder. The words in Arabic became more pointed, clearly directed at her. She served their food, refilled their drinks, and maintained her smile. Each time she approached, she felt the tension, but she also felt something else, a quiet determination. She had always prided herself on her composure, on her ability to handle difficult situations without losing dignity. This was a test and she would not fail. She reminded herself that she knew the language. She had grown up hearing it, speaking it at home, and understanding every nuance. She was not powerless. Other staff noticed the interaction but did not intervene. They could sense the billionaire's attitude and the young waitress's restraint. Some offered small, knowing looks of encouragement. The restaurant manager had faith in her abilities and had trained the staff to handle difficult customers with tact and professionalism. She felt a small surge of gratitude for that training. It had prepared her for moments like this, moments when confidence and skill mattered more than words. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the illusion of control. He continued speaking in Arabic, joking and laughing at what he assumed was her ignorance. The waitress continued serving, careful to avoid eye contact that could provoke a confrontation. She reminded herself of her goals: professionalism, dignity, and composure. She did not need to prove herself in this moment. She only needed to maintain her integrity. The more he mocked, the more she felt the fire of determination grow inside her. She would not be broken by arrogance or wealth. As the meal progressed, she moved between tables, cleaning up, refilling drinks, and checking on other diners. Her mind remained aware of the billionaire's table, observing silently, listening carefully. She noted every word, every gesture, every laugh. She was learning not only about the man but about herself. This was more than a challenging customer. It was a reminder of her strength, her intelligence, and her ability to navigate difficult situations with grace. She realized that confidence was not about wealth or status. It was about knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone diminish that. The billionaire's laughter grew louder as he told a story in Arabic, certain that she could not understand. She served the dessert, placing plates in front of them with a steady hand. She felt a mix of anger and determination but maintained her calm. She thought about her family, about the sacrifices she had made, and about the lessons she had learned. She knew that one day her patience and intelligence would be recognized, even if it was not by this table. For now, she focused on the work in front of her, trusting that her strength would guide her through. By the end of the evening, the tension had not diminished. The billionaire and his companions had enjoyed their meal, oblivious to the fact that their words had been heard and understood. The waitress had maintained her composure, her professionalism, and her dignity. She had endured the mockery silently, knowing that a response, if it came, would be powerful and meaningful. She cleaned the last few tables, returned trays to the kitchen, and took a deep breath. Another shift would come, another challenge would arrive, but she was ready. She knew her strength, her skill, and her intelligence. And she knew that one day, the world would see her not just as a waitress, but as a person of courage and respect. After serving the billionaire and his companions their meals, the young waitress stepped back for a brief moment, allowing herself a quiet breath. The restaurant buzzed with life around her, but her mind was focused on the table she had just left. She knew that the group believed she did not understand a word of Arabic, that they could mock her freely without consequence. The confidence in their laughter only made her more aware of the power dynamics at play. She reminded herself that her understanding of the language was her quiet strength, and she would use it at the right moment. For now, she needed patience and composure. She moved gracefully to another table, greeting a family who had just arrived. "Good evening," she said with a soft smile. "Would you like to start with some drinks while you look at the menu?" Her voice was calm, warm, and professional. The family smiled, appreciating her kindness and attention. As she poured their water and offered recommendations for appetizers, she felt a small wave of relief. Focusing on other customers allowed her mind to steady, to calm the rising tension from the billionaire's table. She reminded herself that she had handled difficult situations before, and she could handle this one too. Even as she engaged with other diners, her ears stayed alert. She could not help but notice the conversation at the billionaire's table continuing in Arabic. The laughter and mocking comments had not stopped. They were talking about her, questioning her intelligence, her education, even the way she walked and smiled. Each word felt like an invisible weight pressing down on her, but she did not let it show. She had learned long ago that emotions could be weapons, both for and against you. Showing anger or frustration now would only give them a sense of victory, a sense of control she would never allow them to have. As she walked to the kitchen to collect more plates, she reminded herself of her upbringing. She had grown up in a household where Arabic was spoken fluently. Her parents had taught her the value of patience, respect, and knowledge. They had also taught her to never underestimate her own strength, even when the world seemed to do so. Those lessons had become her shield. They had taught her that intelligence and dignity were not defined by wealth, but by character and perseverance. As she carried the trays, she felt a quiet confidence returning, a sense of control she had feared was slipping. Back at the billionaire's table, she noticed that their mocking had grown bolder. They were laughing more loudly, pointing at her subtly as they spoke. She felt the sting of their words, but she also felt something else. Determination. She would not allow their arrogance to break her spirit. She approached the table with the next course, placing plates in front of each person with practiced ease. Her hands were steady, her posture elegant, and her smile polite. Yet inside a fire burned. Every step she took, every gesture she made was measured and precise. She was not just serving food. She was holding her ground, silently asserting her presence and her worth. One of the companions made a comment, clearly meant to belittle her, assuming she could not understand. The words were sharp, teasing, and cruel in tone, though lightly veiled as humor. She listened carefully, letting the words wash over her without reacting outwardly. In that moment, she realized that her calmness was more powerful than any words she could speak. By not giving them the satisfaction of a visible reaction, she forced them to confront the limits of their assumptions. They did not know her, and yet they believed they held all the power. She smiled politely as she refilled their drinks, a smile that hid her inner strength and intelligence. Other staff members noticed the tension but did not intervene. They could see the subtle battle playing out, one of quiet endurance versus arrogant mockery. Some exchanged knowing glances, silently acknowledging her courage. She felt a sense of solidarity, a reminder that she was not alone. Even if the customers did not recognize her strength, her peers did. That recognition, though quiet, was comforting. It reminded her that dignity and professionalism were sometimes witnessed in small, silent ways, rather than in grand gestures. As she moved through the restaurant, she reflected on how often people underestimate others based on appearance or position. She had experienced it countless times in her life, people assuming she was less capable because of her job, her age, or her background. Each assumption had been a lesson in disguise, teaching her resilience, patience, and the importance of maintaining composure. She thought about the irony of the situation. The billionaire believed himself untouchable, confident in his status and wealth, while she, someone he considered insignificant, held knowledge and skill he could not see. That thought brought her a small, private sense of satisfaction. The evening continued, and the restaurant grew louder with laughter, conversation, and clinking glasses. She worked tirelessly, moving between tables, serving dishes, clearing plates, and ensuring that every customer felt attended to. Despite the mocking words, she maintained her focus and her professionalism. She reminded herself that her role was not just to serve food, but to create an experience for the customers, even if some of those customers were unkind. Her ability to remain composed in the face of ridicule was a testament to her character, a quiet victory she carried within herself. At the billionaire's table, she noticed a shift. While they continued speaking in Arabic, their tone had become more careless, more confident, as if mocking her further would bring amusement. She listened carefully, noting each word and its meaning. Her knowledge of the language gave her an invisible power, one that was growing stronger with every passing moment. She realized that she had the opportunity to respond in a way that would not only assert her dignity but also teach a subtle lesson about respect and intelligence. She began to plan carefully, considering the right words, the right moment, and the right tone. It was not revenge she sought, but acknowledgement, a recognition of her presence and her worth. As she approached the table with dessert, she noticed the billionaire leaning back in his chair, a smug smile on his face. He assumed victory, believing that his wealth, status, and language barrier placed him above scrutiny. She served the dessert with a calm, polite voice, placing each plate in front of the guests with care. She maintained eye contact only as necessary, a deliberate choice that kept her composed and in control. Her internal dialogue reminded her that confidence was not loud or aggressive. It was quiet, steady, and unshakable. She felt the weight of the moment but also the strength of her preparation. Her mind wandered briefly to her family, to the sacrifices she had made, and to the lessons she had learned from her parents. They had taught her the importance of respect, education, and inner strength. They had reminded her that life would often place her in situations where she would be underestimated, laughed at, or ignored. But they had also taught her that these moments were opportunities to demonstrate character, to hold dignity, and to respond with intelligence and grace. She carried these lessons with her now, feeling them guide every movement, every word, and every decision she made in the restaurant that evening. The laughter at the billionaire's table grew louder, and the mocking tone became more pronounced. Yet she did not falter. She continued to serve, to clear plates, and to attend to other customers with the same level of care and attention. Each action was deliberate, a demonstration of her professionalism and resilience. She understood that strength often comes not from confrontation but from endurance, from maintaining dignity even when tested. The more they laughed, the more determined she became to respond in her own time, with intelligence and precision. As the evening drew closer to its end, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and anticipation. She had navigated a difficult and humiliating situation with grace and composure. She had listened, observed, and learned, all while maintaining professionalism. She knew that the moment to assert herself would come, and when it did, it would be powerful. She did not rush it, did not force it. She understood that timing, patience, and clarity would make her response meaningful and unforgettable. For now, she focused on the immediate tasks, keeping her calm and maintaining her dignity. When the table finally requested the check, she felt a quiet sense of readiness. She would approach this moment not with anger, not with fear, but with the strength she had cultivated over years of experience. She had endured mockery, maintained composure, and planned her response carefully. The power of knowledge, confidence, and dignity was hers, and it would shine at the right time. She collected the check, walked toward the table, and carried herself with a quiet, steady confidence. Everything had led to this moment, and she was ready. The evening had grown quieter, the restaurant still busy but less chaotic than earlier. The young waitress had completed most of her tasks, clearing tables, refilling drinks, and checking in on other customers. Yet her thoughts remained fixed on the billionaire's table. Every moment they had spoken in Arabic, she had listened carefully, cataloging each word, each tone, and each gesture. She had endured their mocking and laughter, maintaining a calm smile and steady composure. But now, As they reached the end of their meal, she felt a quiet determination growing inside her. The moment to act had arrived. She approached the table with the check, placing it neatly in front of the billionaire. Her hands were steady, her posture elegant, her eyes calm. She could feel the weight of the moment but refused to let it show. He looked up at her, his confident expression betraying no awareness of what was about to happen. To him, she was just a waitress, someone beneath his notice. He leaned back in his chair, smirking slightly, certain that his wealth and status kept him untouchable. His companions whispered to each other, still laughing softly in Arabic, thinking their mockery would go unnoticed. The waitress waited a moment, letting her gaze sweep across the table, her calm presence commanding attention without a single raised voice. She reminded herself that this was not about revenge or anger. This was about dignity, respect, and intelligence. She had listened to their words, understood their intentions, and now she had the power to respond in a way that would leave a lasting impact. She took a deep breath and spoke. Her voice was clear and confident as she addressed the billionaire and his companions in fluent Arabic. Every word was precise, every phrase carefully measured. She repeated some of the phrases they had used to mock her, but she restructured them with calm authority, correcting the assumptions they had made. She spoke of respect, education, and the importance of humility, reminding them that wealth does not make a person superior and that intelligence is not determined by one's status. Her tone was polite but firm, carrying the weight of truth and experience. For a moment, silence filled the table. The billionaire froze, the smirk fading from his face as he realized she had understood every word. His companions turned to look at him, their expressions shifting from amusement to shock. They had not expected her to comprehend the language, much less respond so eloquently and confidently. The restaurant seemed to pause around them, as if the air itself had changed. Other diners began to notice the sudden quiet, sensing that something significant was unfolding, though they could not understand the words. The waitress continued, her calm voice cutting through the tension. She spoke not with anger but with clarity and precision, explaining that mockery and arrogance reveal more about the person who uses them than the person they target. She reminded them that dignity is maintained through respect, not wealth, and that understanding, education, and compassion are qualities that cannot be purchased. Every word was deliberate, every sentence carrying the weight of experience, of a life built on resilience and strength. The billionaire's eyes widened as he absorbed her words. His companions looked at him in disbelief, realizing that their assumptions had been completely wrong. They had underestimated her because of her job, her age, and her appearance. Now, they were faced with the undeniable truth. She was intelligent, confident, and unshakable. The power dynamics had shifted in an instant, and the atmosphere at the table had transformed. The waitress had not raised her voice, she had not insulted anyone, but her words had done what mockery could not, asserted her worth and demanded respect. Other staff members and nearby diners began to notice the shift in energy. The young waitress stood tall, composed, and calm, a picture of confidence and professionalism. The billionaire fidgeted slightly, trying to regain his composure, but the impact of her words lingered. He attempted to respond, but his voice sounded uncertain, even awkward. He had expected submission or silence, not a graceful but firm correction of his behavior. The young waitress met his gaze with quiet strength, her eyes conveying that she was neither intimidated nor impressed by his wealth. Her companions at the table exchanged glances, their whispers now subdued. The laughter had vanished, replaced by a stunned awareness of her presence and capability. They were forced to acknowledge, silently and reluctantly, that they had misjudged her completely. The young waitress's fluent Arabic, combined with her calm demeanor, had disrupted their sense of superiority. She had transformed the situation without confrontation, without aggression, relying solely on her intelligence, composure, and understanding. The billionaire finally attempted an apology, his voice hesitant. We did not expect," he began, searching for words that would convey sincerity without losing face. The young waitress nodded politely, acknowledging his attempt, but she did not allow the apology to shift the power back. She accepted it with grace, her expression calm and unwavering, signaling that respect must be genuine, not forced. The moment was no longer about punishment or humiliation. It was about acknowledgement and balance. She had demonstrated that dignity and strength come from character, not wealth. Nearby diners who had noticed the exchange whispered among themselves. Some admired her courage, others were inspired by her composure. The restaurant staff, who had watched quietly, felt pride and relief. They knew how challenging the situation had been, how easy it would have been to falter under the weight of mockery and intimidation. Yet she had remained steadfast, turning a moment meant to belittle her into a demonstration of inner strength and intelligence. The young waitress took a moment to collect herself, ensuring that her body language remained calm and professional. She cleared the plates from the table with steady hands, moving with the same grace and efficiency she had shown throughout the evening. The billionaire and his companions sat in silence, absorbing the reality of what had just occurred. The atmosphere, once charged with arrogance and mockery, was now marked by respect and quiet acknowledgement. The young waitress had changed the narrative without raising her voice, without confrontation, and without aggression. As she walked back to the other tables, she felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. She had endured, observed, and responded with intelligence and dignity. She had shown that knowledge and composure can wield a power far greater than wealth or social status. She reminded herself that true strength is often silent, measured, and deliberate. The billionaire and his companions would remember this moment, not because of anger or humiliation, but because of the undeniable truth she had communicated. The rest of the evening passed more smoothly, the tension dissipating as the group finished their meal. The young waitress continued her work, serving other tables, clearing dishes, and maintaining the calm, professional demeanor that had carried her through the night. Yet the memory of her words and the shift in the atmosphere lingered. She had proven to herself, more than anyone else, that intelligence, dignity, and courage are not defined by appearance or circumstance. As the group finally rose to leave, the billionaire looked at her again. There was no smirk this time, no trace of arrogance. Instead, there was a quiet acknowledgement, a recognition of her strength and composure. He nodded slightly, a gesture of respect that spoke louder than words. The companions followed, still processing what had occurred, their laughter replaced by thoughtful silence. The young waitress watched them leave, her posture relaxed but her mind alert. She had faced a challenge, and she had met it with grace and intelligence. Once the table was gone, she took a deep breath and allowed herself a small moment of relief. The restaurant was busy, but the air felt lighter. She had handled one of the most intimidating situations of her career with professionalism, strength, and dignity. The experience reminded her of the lessons her parents had taught her about patience, respect, and inner strength. It reminded her that true power comes from knowledge, composure, and the ability to stand firm in the face of arrogance. Her colleagues approached, offering quiet smiles of admiration. They knew what she had endured, and they recognized the skill and courage it took to respond as she had. Some whispered words of encouragement, others expressed awe at her calm and precise handling of the situation. She thanked them with a polite nod, her expression calm, but inside, she felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. She had turned a moment of potential humiliation into a demonstration of dignity and intelligence. The young waitress continued her shift, moving from table to table, serving drinks, clearing dishes, and checking on customers. The memory of the billionaire's table remained in her mind, not as a source of anger or resentment, but as a reminder of her own strength. She had endured mockery, maintained composure, and responded with intelligence and grace. She had proven to herself that respect is earned through character, not assumed through wealth or status. As the night wore on, the restaurant began to quiet down. The lights dimmed slightly, and the last customers finished their meals. The young waitress reflected on the events of the evening, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. She had faced a challenge that tested her patience, resilience, and intelligence, and she had emerged stronger. She knew that moments like these would shape her, teaching lessons that went far beyond the walls of the restaurant. When her shift finally ended, she walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air. The city lights glimmered around her, and she felt a sense of calm and accomplishment. She had faced arrogance, mockery, and intimidation, and she had responded with grace, intelligence, and dignity. The experience reminded her that true strength is measured not by outward appearances or social status, but by the ability to remain composed, confident, and true to oneself in the face of adversity. After the billionaire and his companions left, the restaurant returned to its usual rhythm. The clinking of cutlery, quiet conversations, and soft background music filled the space once again. But the young waitress could feel that something significant had occurred, even if it wasn't spoken aloud. The atmosphere had shifted, not just at that table, but throughout the restaurant. Other staff members and even a few diners who had witnessed the exchange whispered quietly among themselves, discussing the remarkable display of composure and intelligence they had just seen. It was a moment that would linger in everyone's memory, subtle yet powerful, a reminder that true respect cannot be bought or demanded. It must be earned. The young waitress walked back to her station, her steps steady, her posture relaxed yet confident. She had handled the situation with grace, speaking fluently in Arabic and responding to every mocking word with dignity and calm authority. Now, as she wiped down tables and refilled water glasses, she felt a mixture of relief and pride. Relief that the tension had passed without confrontation, and pride in the way she had held her ground. She knew that it would take some time for the impact of her words to settle in her own mind, but she allowed herself a quiet moment to breathe and reflect. Meanwhile, the billionaire and his companions were sitting in their private vehicle outside the restaurant, a rare silence filling the space between them. The man who had always commanded attention, who had thrived on influence and wealth, now found himself quiet, almost vulnerable. His companions looked at him, surprised at the uncharacteristic quiet, as if they were witnessing a side of him they had never seen before. He replayed the interaction in his mind, the calm, measured words of the young waitress echoing clearly. Every phrase she had spoken carried weight, every sentence delivered with a confidence and understanding that he could not deny. For the first time, he felt a pang of humility, a sense that he had misjudged someone based on appearance and status alone. He had assumed that wealth and influence automatically granted superiority, that a waitress could not understand the language or the context of his remarks. But her fluent Arabic and poised response had shattered that assumption completely. He realized that he had underestimated her intelligence and, in doing so, had revealed his own arrogance. It was an uncomfortable revelation, one that forced him to reflect on his behavior and the way he treated others, particularly those he considered beneath him. The companions, too, were quiet, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. They had witnessed the unexpected shift in power, the sudden change in energy at the table. What they had thought would be a simple act of superiority, a moment of casual mockery, had turned into a lesson in respect and dignity. They could not deny that the young waitress had handled herself with professionalism and intelligence that far exceeded their expectations. For the first time, the billionaire was not the dominant presence. She had claimed that space with quiet authority, and they all felt it. Back inside the restaurant, the young waitress continued her duties, serving other customers and maintaining her professionalism. She moved through the tables with grace, each action deliberate and precise. The whispers of admiration from other staff members gave her a subtle sense of acknowledgement, though she did not seek attention or praise. She understood that her response had not only addressed the mockery she faced, but had also demonstrated a level of composure and intelligence that resonated with those around her. She had set an example, showing that dignity and confidence are qualities that shine brightest when challenged. As the night progressed, she reflected on the experience, thinking about the lessons it had reinforced. She remembered the times in her life when she had been underestimated, dismissed, or ignored. Each of those moments had prepared her for this one, teaching her patience, resilience, and the power of silent strength. She understood that responding with anger or aggression would have diminished her impact. Instead, By remaining calm and speaking with clarity and intelligence, she had asserted her worth in a way that could not be ignored or dismissed. The billionaire, meanwhile, could not stop thinking about her words. He realized that the humility he felt was necessary, that he had been reminded of something fundamental, that wealth and status are not measures of intelligence or respect. He replayed her sentences over and over in his mind, marveling at the precision and dignity with which she had spoken. He knew that his companions had noticed it too, and he felt a quiet sense of accountability settle over him. He had been taught many lessons in life, but this one, delivered by someone he had assumed to be insignificant, carried a weight he could not ignore. In the days following the incident, the story of the young waitress's calm and fluent response spread quietly among the restaurant staff and loyal patrons. Some told the tale to friends and family, emphasizing the intelligence, composure, and courage she had displayed. Others reflected on the lesson it offered, that assumptions based on appearance, job, or status are often false, and that respect must always be earned through character. The young waitress herself did not seek recognition, but she felt a quiet sense of validation, knowing that her actions had made a lasting impression. Her confidence continued to grow, not from the admiration of others, but from the knowledge that she had maintained her dignity and integrity under pressure. She understood that challenges and mockery were opportunities to demonstrate strength, to show that intelligence and composure are more powerful than any attempt at humiliation. Each interaction with the billionaire and his companions had reinforced her understanding that true power lies not in wealth or social standing, but in the ability to remain calm, confident, and respectful even in the face of disrespect. The experience also changed the billionaire, though subtly. In his future interactions, he found himself more mindful of how he treated others, more aware that assumptions based on status or appearance could be misleading. The memory of her calm, fluent response became a quiet lesson in humility, one that reminded him that respect is a two-way street. He realized that intelligence and character are qualities that can come from any walk of life, and that underestimating someone based on superficial factors is both unwise and unfair. Back at the restaurant, life returned to normal, but the young waitress carried with her a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. She continued to work diligently, serving customers with professionalism and grace, but she also knew that she had demonstrated something far greater than simple skill. She had shown courage, intelligence, and dignity in the face of mockery. Her actions had left a lasting impression not only on the billionaire and his companions but also on her colleagues and the other patrons who had witnessed the exchange. As she closed the restaurant for the night, she reflected on the events of the evening. She thought about how easily assumptions can be made and how often people are judged unfairly. She understood that her calm and precise response had not only addressed the immediate situation but had also sent a message about the importance of respect, intelligence, and dignity. She felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had handled the situation with professionalism and grace, leaving a lasting impression that would be remembered long after the night had ended. The young waitress walked home, the cool night air brushing against her face. She thought about the lessons she had learned and the strength she had shown. She realized that true power does not come from wealth or social status, but from the ability to remain composed, confident, and true to oneself. The experience had reinforced her understanding of her own worth and abilities, reminding her that intelligence, dignity, and courage are qualities that shine brightest in challenging moments. In the days that followed, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that was noticeable to those around her. Customers responded to her professionalism and warmth, colleagues admired her composure, and even the memory of the billionaire's table seemed to give her a sense of quiet empowerment. She understood that the night had been a turning point, not because of recognition or praise, but because it had reminded her of her own strength and resilience. She had faced mockery, intimidation, and arrogance, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. The restaurant continued to be busy, filled with regulars and new customers alike, but the young waitress moved through her work with a sense of purpose that went beyond the usual tasks of her job. She served each table with attention, care, and respect, knowing that her actions reflected not just her skills but her character. The experience with the billionaire and his companions had taught her that true power comes from intelligence, composure, and the ability to respond with dignity under pressure. By the end of each shift, she felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense that she had done more than just serve meals. She had demonstrated resilience, courage, and respect. She had faced a challenge that tested her patience, her intelligence, and her character, and she had met it with grace and dignity. The lesson was clear. Respect and strength are earned through actions, not assumed through wealth or status, and those who underestimate others often find themselves humbled in unexpected ways. The young waitress continued to reflect on the impact of that night. She knew that the billionaire and his companions had been forced to reconsider their assumptions, that her calm and articulate response had shifted the dynamics in a subtle but powerful way. She also understood that the experience had reinforced her own sense of self-worth, reminding her that dignity, intelligence, and composure are qualities that cannot be taken away, no matter the circumstances. As she prepared for another day of work, she felt a renewed sense of confidence and purpose. She had faced mockery, arrogance, and intimidation, and she had emerged with her dignity intact. The experience had shown her that true power is measured not by wealth or status, but by the ability to maintain composure, think clearly, and respond with intelligence and grace. She carried these lessons with her, knowing that they would guide her in every challenge she faced in the future. The days following that evening passed in a blur of normal work at the restaurant, but nothing felt quite ordinary to the young waitress. Each time she moved through the tables, served plates, or refilled glasses, she carried with her the quiet satisfaction of having faced a challenge that tested her patience, intelligence, and composure. The incident with the billionaire and his companions had left an imprint not only on them but on herself, on her colleagues, and even on some of the regular customers who had witnessed it. She knew the significance of what had happened. Though it had been a moment of silence, restraint, and calm words, it had spoken volumes about who she was and what she could do under pressure. Even as she focused on her work, her mind occasionally drifted to that night. She remembered the smirk on the billionaire's face as he assumed superiority, the hushed laughter of his companions, and then the stunned silence when she responded in flawless Arabic. That moment had been a turning point. She had transformed a situation meant to humiliate her into a display of quiet strength and intelligence. She had shown that respect does not come from money, status, or position, but from the dignity, courage, and knowledge a person carries within themselves. Her colleagues had been quietly observant during the incident, and afterward, they could not stop expressing their admiration in subtle ways. A nod of approval, a small smile, or a quiet word of encouragement acknowledged the courage and composure she had shown. She appreciated these gestures, but she did not seek attention or praise. She understood that her strength did not need validation. She had acted with integrity, and that was enough. For her, the knowledge that she had held her dignity intact and responded intelligently to arrogance was far more meaningful than any recognition from others. The billionaire, in contrast, had been deeply affected by the encounter. The confident, self-assured man who had walked into the restaurant, expecting to be entertained and served, had left with a quiet sense of humility. He found himself replaying her words repeatedly, the calm authority in her voice echoing in his mind. Her intelligence and composure had forced him to reconsider not only his assumptions about her but also his approach to others in general. For the first time in a long while, he recognized the danger of arrogance and the importance of respect that is earned, not assumed. Over the following weeks, he noticed changes in himself. He found himself more aware of how he spoke to people of different positions and more thoughtful in his interactions. He could not forget the young waitress who had spoken calmly, firmly, and with intelligence, leaving him humbled yet enlightened. Her words had reminded him that intelligence, dignity, and strength are not determined by wealth or power. This realization, while uncomfortable, was valuable. He began to see that respect must be mutual and that people, regardless of their status, deserve to be treated with courtesy and fairness. Back at the restaurant, the young waitress continued her work with renewed confidence. She greeted each customer with warmth and professionalism, and she noticed that even her usual interactions felt different. There was a quiet assurance in her movements, in her tone, and in the way she carried herself. The incident had reinforced her understanding of her own worth and capability. She knew that she had acted with courage and intelligence, and this knowledge gave her a subtle but powerful sense of empowerment. Her reputation among the staff grew quietly. Those who had witnessed the exchange with the billionaire often spoke of it in hushed tones, admiring her calm, articulate response. Some shared the story with friends and family outside the restaurant, emphasizing her intelligence, composure, and bravery. For the young waitress, these stories were not about glory but about the affirmation that dignity, knowledge, and strength are qualities that can make a lasting impact, even in situations where one feels underestimated or ignored. The young waitress also reflected on her own growth. She had always known that she was capable, intelligent, and resilient, but the incident had confirmed it in a very public way. She had faced mockery, arrogance, and subtle intimidation, and she had responded with grace and precision. That experience became a reminder that life often presents challenges that test not only skill but character, and that the way one responds to adversity defines their true strength. She carried this lesson with her into every interaction, every shift, and every decision she made. Meanwhile, the billionaire's experience had not gone unnoticed in his circle. He began to share the story in private, emphasizing the lesson it had taught him. His colleagues and friends were intrigued by the young waitress who had handled a group of wealthy and powerful individuals with intelligence and calm authority. Some admired the story. Others reflected on their own behavior, recognizing the humility and insight it conveyed. Though the encounter was brief, its impact rippled far beyond that one evening, influencing not just the people present but also those who would hear about it afterward. The young waitress, however, did not see herself as extraordinary. She saw herself as someone who had remained true to her principles, someone who had acted with respect, intelligence, and composure when tested. She understood that courage is not always loud, that strength does not need to shout, and that dignity is often maintained in quiet, deliberate actions. Her story became one of subtle triumph, of a person proving their worth not through confrontation but through calm, intelligent, and respectful response. As weeks passed, she continued to excel in her role. Customers noticed her attentiveness, her professionalism, and the warmth she brought to each interaction. Colleagues admired her dedication and composure, and she became a source of quiet inspiration within the restaurant. She understood that her work was more than just serving food. It was creating experiences, maintaining respect, and demonstrating strength through her actions. Her confidence grew, not from external recognition, but from knowing that she had met one of the most challenging situations of her career with intelligence and grace. The lessons from that evening extended beyond the restaurant and into her personal life. She became more assertive in her decisions, more confident in her abilities, and more mindful of the value of patience, observation, and preparation. She realized that challenges often present opportunities to demonstrate strength, and that responding with composure and intelligence can leave a far more lasting impression than anger or confrontation ever could. Each day became an opportunity to apply the wisdom she had gained, to act with dignity, and to navigate life's obstacles with confidence and clarity. In reflecting on the incident, she also understood the importance of empathy. While the billionaire had mocked her and her colleagues, he had ultimately learned a valuable lesson. She realized that people often act from a place of misunderstanding, ignorance, or arrogance, and that a calm, clear response can be far more transformative than confrontation. By speaking with clarity, dignity, and intelligence, she had not only defended herself but also created a moment of reflection and growth for those who had underestimated her. Her family and close friends, who knew her well, noticed a subtle change in her demeanor. She carried herself with quiet confidence, a calm assurance that came from knowing her own strength and intelligence. They celebrated her resilience, her patience, and her ability to navigate a difficult and intimidating situation without compromising her values. They recognized that true courage often comes in moments of quiet strength, and that the impact of such moments can extend far beyond the immediate situation. The story of that evening became a personal anchor for the young waitress. It reminded her that even in moments when others seek to belittle, intimidate, or undermine, one's response defines the outcome. By maintaining composure, demonstrating intelligence, and speaking with dignity, she had transformed a moment meant to shame her into a display of strength and self-respect. The experience reinforced her understanding that respect is earned through character, not demanded through status or wealth. Months later, the memory of the billionaire and his companions still lingered. While she did not dwell on it, she appreciated the lesson it had provided. It had shown her the power of calm intelligence, the importance of dignity under pressure, and the ability to create lasting impact through thoughtful action. She understood that true strength is quiet, deliberate, and unwavering, and that even brief encounters can shape personal growth and understanding in profound ways. The young waitress continued her life with confidence, grace, and purpose. She carried the lessons from that evening into every interaction, every challenge, and every decision. She understood that intelligence, dignity, and composure are qualities that resonate beyond wealth, status, or appearance. Her actions had demonstrated that one person, by remaining true to themselves, could create change and command respect in any situation. Ultimately, the story became one of quiet triumph. The young waitress had faced mockery, arrogance, and subtle intimidation, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. She had shown that dignity and intelligence are powerful tools, capable of influencing others and transforming situations without aggression or confrontation. Her example became a reminder that true strength lies in character, patience, and composure, and that respect is a reflection of one's own integrity, not the wealth or status of another. As she continued her work, the young waitress carried the lessons of that night with her always. She knew that life would present challenges, moments of doubt, and opportunities for growth. But she also knew that she had the intelligence, patience, and strength to navigate any situation with dignity. The experience with the billionaire and his companions had been more than just a single evening. It had been a defining moment, a test of character, and a quiet triumph that would shape her life and the lives of those around her.